guys, good day to everyone on my TikTok page. Today I will be talking about being mindful of being indoctrinated by pseudo quotations or pseudo statements which are made by people on social media. So what is happening is some people come on social media and their rhetoric and their ideology is speaking all about pseudo deceptive statements without having any real quantitative numerical statistics to prove their point. There are a lot of people who come on social media and their rhetoric is anecdotal. There's no proof. Is pseudo. There is no proof. There is no real credible logical evidence to prove their point. Okay, so what is happening is this. Yesterday I was watching a live and there was a few people on the panel. I pre-recorded that said live, a piece of that live, and I uploaded it onto my TikTok page. I uploaded it onto my Instagram and also my Facebook page. Now, there was this one African American guy who is saying that he was saying, not in that quite video, I would just paraphrase what he said, right? He said that people should address African American people as American, and they should remove African from that word or from that ethnicity. So he was saying that society should remove African from African American. Okay? In addition to that, a few people who was on that said panel, they agreed with him. One lady, I'm just paraphrasing what these individuals said. So I'm not going to be saying the word-to-word statement which they use, but I'm going to say it in a paraphrasing, reiterating what they said. This one lady said that Malcolm X and Malcolm X and Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., their both ethnicity is not African American. Okay. Firstly, guys, I am going to repudiate. I am going to be completely speaking the opposite antithesis of what these individuals said on that live. A few of these individuals are birthed and they were raised in the United States of America. Their ethnicity is African American. They want to denounce being genetically from Africa or having any form or ties from Africa. They want people to call them Americans and not African Americans. And that's why I am saying that people on social media, whenever you are watching and listening to some people speak, their speech is pseudo quotations, their speech is pejorative, which is slanderous, derogatory, and there is no credibility in what they speak of. Okay, guys. Malcolm X, ethnicity is African American. Martin Luther King Jr., ethnicity is African American. Both men fought for freedom. They both had a different way of rhetoric, because Malcolm X believed in violence whereas Martin Luther King Jr. believed in non-violence. Malcolm X was more a radical person. He believed that we need to fight, and we need to fight physically, whereas Dr. King believed in non-violence. Okay, so the both men, they were both abolitionists, they were both nationalists, and they both believe in fighting for freedom for African American people, but they both had a different rhetoric, and they have a different belief. One belief in violence, the other belief in non-violence. Now, in the year 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed. It was passed in the year 1964. Both men attended that. They both attended that, I will call it the ceremony, where the act, where that law or the act was being implemented. They both met for briefly. They both met for a brief minute or so, and they did had a discourse, and they did had a dialogue, conversation, and they understood that they both had a different way of thinking, whereas Malcolm X believed in violence and Martin Luther King Jr. believed in non-violence. But they both had the same agenda, which was to live. They both lived to see the Civil Rights Act, which was implemented, the law was implemented in the year 1964. Now, unfortunately, Malcolm X was assassinated in the year 1965, and 3 years after, Dr. King was assassinated in the year 1968. Both men ethnicity is African American. I know that some African American people are hurting. I know when they do their research on history, they will see that slavery was quite prevalent back in the early 1600s, 1700s. I understand to read and do your research on history is very hard. You feel, you empathize and you sympathize with your ancestors. But to actually come on social media and denounce that you have any form of affiliations with people from Africa is just speaking pseudo quotation. It's just speaking from a place of denial. Okay, guys? In addition to that, one of the guys, there was a lady from Africa came on that said panel, and she was explaining how some people in Africa, how they speak against some African Americans. Now, one of the guys on that said panel, he said to that young lady from Africa that she is inferior. When that man made that statement, I immediately sent a request, and I had a discourse or dialogue with this young African American man. I said, why would you use such words like that? Why would you call the lady from Africa inferior? Are you projecting apotheosis? Are you projecting that you are in a higher position than she is? Are you projecting superiority? And yes, some African American people, they do feel that they are superior over people from the third world country. And this is a way of thinking of capitalism. Whereas because you are living in a country which has opportunities and which is a bit more wealthier than other countries, that doesn't give you the right to project apotheosis or to project superiority and to call people from the third world country inferior. So what I am here to say this morning is, there is a division within the diaspora. We're living in a world today whereas a lot of people, our ancestors from Africa, they were transported, enslaved throughout the world. And we, melanin people, people of color, are descendants from Africa. And that is credible and validity and veracity of information that you will ever get. You can go do your own research. As much as the colonizer played a part of contributing and exploiting people of color, exploiting them for labor, as much as we understand that the colonizer de-enfranchised and dehumanized our ancestors, as much as we understand that to research history, it hurts to know that our ancestors were stripped of their dignity and identity. But to come on social media and to denounce and deny using a defense mechanism and to speak and say that Dr. King and Malcolm X are not African American is to broadly speak pseudo quotations and pseudo statements. So therefore, I am going to repudiate, reject those type of rhetoric that are being spewed on social media. African American people and people from Africa and people within the diaspora need to come together as one. I understand that we all have different cultures, because I am a Trinidadian, and within being raised in Trinidad, of course, I was raised with a different constructionism, with different social construct, different thoughts and beliefs. And people who were raised here in the United States, they will have a different social construct as well. Likewise, Africa, likewise, Canada, likewise, England. But one thing that make us share similarity is by the color of our skin. And also by the texture of some of our hair. Now, some people will do genealogy. They will do a DNA testing. Upon results, those results, you're going to see you have a larger percentage from Africa. You may see that you have a small percentage of indigenous, Native American. You have a small percentage of probably European. Now, we are not going to negate the fact that back in the early 1700s, that African American people or people from Africa, they would have been intermarrying or being in relationships with people from different ethnicity. And that's why if you do your genealogy, your DNA testing, you're going to see you have a smaller percentage from native or indigenous people. You're going to see within your DNA testing from genealogy testing results, you're going to see you have some form of your ancestries are a little bit of Native American, a little bit of Europeans, but the larger percentage will always be Africa or African. Okay? I want people within the diaspora to come together as one in solidarity. I understand the history. Doing your research on history, it hurts. It hurts to know that your ancestors have gone through 400 years of slavery. I understand and I sympathize. But to come on social media and to deny, to use a defense mechanism, to deny who you are and where you came from, is not going to make any sense. There is no credibility there. You cannot tell me which .gov or .com you got that credible information from. If you cannot tell me and give me some form of quantitative, numerical statistics, empirical data, where you got your information from, therefore it is pseudo. is pseudo. It is invalid. There is no real credible information. If you don't have any real credible information, therefore it is false. Okay, ladies and gents. Right now I'm thinking, because there is another, besides talking about that, of the statement that that guy made, I wanted to talk about something else as well. So guys, give me a brief minute as I think. Within the black community, there is a stigma against seeking therapy. There is a stigma, ladies and gents. And while that guy was talking last night and denouncing and denying that he is a descendant from Africa, he was denying that. And he was proclaiming that people should address him as American. Remove the African, just address him as American. The guy was saying that. That guy was speaking in a place of hurt. Now, we know that some African American people go through disintegration. They feel low in strength. They feel disempowered. Okay? We understand that some black African American people go through feeling intersectionality, where they themselves experience oppression and discrimination in their own way. We know that racism do exist. Now, while we understand and we acknowledge that racism do exist, and we sympathize with victims who experience racism, at the same time, to deny the fact that you are of an African descent is irrelevant. And I stand with what I say. Because to know one's identity, to know your own identity and to know one's identity, you need to know of. To be living in a world whereas you feel that all the information that was said about history is not credible, there is no veracity with that history, then you're going to be living in a world lost. You're going to be lost. Okay? So you need to know your identity. And a lot of the majority of black people, they seem to don't know their identity. They don't know who they are as a person. They don't know where they came from. Okay? And this is sad. Okay, I now remember what I have to say. So I want to give you guys what is the meaning of race, and also how humans have manipulative the meaning of race. Okay, so race cannot be determined by genetics. It cannot be determined by biological. It cannot be determined by genes. Now, race can be determined by hair color, characteristics like hair color, physiques, etc. But to determine race, the meaning of race, it cannot be determined biological, genetically. It cannot be determined. So if you do your research, race, if you look up the meaning of race, it cannot be determined by skin color. But the Europeans, they have manipulated that said word called race, and they have caused and promoted, whereas whitey people supposed to be looked upon as superior and people of color supposed to be looked upon as inferior. Whitey people living as capitalists, while people of color are seen as inferior and the minority.